speak about, there's a feeling, this movie feels, I think most in kinship would say It's a Wonderful Life. And I felt like It's a Wonderful Life always works because what people forget is how dark the first act is, and how dark Jimmy Stewart goes. He goes to the point where you truly believe he is going to jump off that bridge, he is going to kill himself. And I felt like the power of this movie, what gave it sort of the locomotive engine, is the first act / third act, which is very unnerving and despairing in some ways, in terms of what happens to the world, not necessarily in terms of how the people deal with it. So I was wondering if you could speak about that.
Oh, certainly. I mean, I couldn't agree with you more about how that contrast really makes It's a Wonderful Life, have that incredible impact. I felt something very similar when I read the short story for the first time. I read it in April 2020, so we were just a month into the COVID lockdown, and I questioned whether I could even finish it when I first started the story because it hit so close to home. And I felt like the world was ending right outside the window back then. And so I didn't know that I wanted to keep reading. It was so dark. But I was compelled to because of the way the characters were reacting to that moment and to this interesting, quiet acceptance that was on the page. What amazed me was where I was at the end of the story. Given how I felt reading those first couple of chapters, if you would have told me that I would have ended the story with tears on my cheeks, but out of joy and optimism and hope and wanting to look back at my life a little differently, I never would have believed it. It was such an incredible journey. And I think that's because Stephen King intuitively, he combines the darkness and the light so beautifully. One can't exist without the other, and they only enhance each other in his work. And so this really had a big impact on me because of that.
Was that something that, Tom and Chiwetel, was that something that attracted you to the material, the sense of I guess, light punching up through the darkness, or the sense of just hope in what are rather hopeless circumstances? And one could argue, I mean, one guy's facing certain death, and the other is facing certain death. There's a lot of certain death in this film. So, but yet, it's really about how you accept it.
Yeah.
It's really about how you face that.
I don't want to sound morbid, but I think about death all the time. By which I mean, like, any contemplation, like this film, any contemplation of mortality inspires a deeper appreciation of life. And I found that's what this story did, is it made me appreciate my life and what was precious and of deep value to me. And it connected with something very personal. I remember I was about 14 years old when I saw The Shawshank Redemption, another Stephen King adaptation that really hit me in my heart. And at the end of that film, we've talked about this, Red, as played by Morgan Freeman, nearly decides not to live. He's like, I can't take it on the outside. And the choice in the film, as presented by King and as presented by Frank Darabont and Tim Robbins and Morgan Freeman, those amazing actors, is get busy living or get busy dying. And at the end of that film, Red decides to live, and he decides to take the bus and go to Sewataneo and see his friend, because that's the only thing that matters. And that friendship and that love and that human connection is what remains. And it lands so resolutely on the side of life that I found intensely moving, and still do. And when I read Mike's screenplay, I had the same feeling. That for Marty at the end of days, as the stars are going out in the sky, or Chuck at the end of his life, surrounded by love, in consideration of the passage of time and the events of his own life, it's life and love that remains. It's not the darkness. And that, to me, is really all we need. It's all we've ever needed. I find it very moving.
thing I can add to that really is that was the sense of that these characters are experiencing an enormous amount of gratitude, and that I think is the other element of it all. You know, I think that Marty, in Marty and Felicia's relationship, I think that as it comes to as the stars literally go out, I think that there's a real sense for him of feeling grateful for having that connection, for being able to have experienced these things, have experienced this life, this world, and love, and the person that you're connected to in it. And I think that's what I felt reading it, that all the way through it felt, even in the darker moments of the story, it always felt it's very life-affirming in the sense it's a life-affirming apocalyptic tale. You know, it's like that you're like in the center of everything is this feeling of hope, and I think I carried that through what's wonderful about working with Mike and the way that the film sort of came together was that from the moment that I arrived, to make the film, that feeling of optimism and the feeling, the sort of philosophical feeling, was right throughout the entire cast and crew, and everybody who was there felt that they were tuned in to telling this story, and so it allowed for this kind of this sort of 360 immersive experience, which I really cherished because absolutely everybody wanted to tell the story and felt it and so powerfully. So yeah, it was very hopeful as an experience.
I wanted to just discuss for a second that they say that the secret to casting is to cast every part as if it's the lead, and I feel like this movie was cast as if every part was the lead. There are remarkable performances. I mean, obviously, I think with Karen, I mean that's obvious. Carloni, that's obvious. But then you had like Matthew Lillard gives an astonishing little cameo there that just comes in the middle of the movie, and not the middle, but the first third. And I thought that the kid who played young Chuck and Mark Hamill and Mia Sara, although that made me just feel fucking old. Luke Skywalker and Ferris Bueller's Girlfriend are playing. And that sucks. But otherwise, let's get back on track. So I was going to say, did you feel that when you were casting this? Was there? Sorry.
Hello.
Yes. Was there a consciousness a conscious effort to cast this as deeply as you did?
Oh, certainly. I am very lucky in that over the course of the last decade or so, I've been slowly kind of accumulating this family of amazing actors, some of whom I've worked with now 9 times, 10 times. And so the first line of defense for me is always call my friends and see if I can get them to come do it. And so there were a number of roles that I kind of knew going in where I wanted to go, but the rest of it, you're right. Everyone is a lead. I think that's true of any film. That's true of any show. There's no such. It's a cliche, but there is no such thing as a small part. If you're all telling the story together, it's an orchestra. It's a chorus. I was able to kind of go hat in hand to some actors I had not worked with, including both of the incredible actors that are on the stage with me right now, both of whom I think did an extraordinary service to me and to the movie by lending their voice and their incredible talent and lifting this story up into the stratosphere the way that you guys did. I would then go to people like Matthew Lillard, who I knew socially barely, and just say, hey, I have a role in this film. It's half of one day of your time shooting, and we don't have any money, but I really think it could have an enormous impact. And fortunately, so many of them said yes. I consider myself incredibly lucky that I was able to work with Mia on this, who had pretty much retired. And
that stunned me. I looked that up, and and she had pretty much retired, so how did you get it?
I met Brian Henson, her husband, and we were talking about a project that we might collaborate on, because I'm a major Muppet fanatic. I'm a lifelong Muppet fiend. And he just kind of volunteered that he was married to Mia and that she loved a show I did called Midnight Mass. And so I suggested that the four of us go out to dinner. We double date, and at that dinner, Mia, Mia just said, "I'm kind of out of the business, but I love the show so much. If there's anything you ever want me to do, I would come do that for you." And I don't know if she really thought I would take her up on it or not, but I got to call her a few months later and say, funny you should mention, I have a part I think you'd be amazing for, and I think she's luminous in the film. So it's a real honor to have her.
Yeah, she anchors that middle section, so, I mean, final section, I'm very confused. But she anchors that final section so beautifully. I mean, that's when, she's almost like a fairy godmother. It ties all the way back to the dance, the finger, everything is really beautifully done, yeah, so. You guys, what pulled you into this script, to this world? You two, what made you want to do this?
I think for me it was immediate and instinctive when I read the script. I felt that it expressed something I have always believed, but had certainly never expressed so poetically and beautifully. Excuse me. A wisdom that actually we all have within us an internal world of infinite possibility, and maybe that world those possibilities feel closer to us as children, and perhaps they recede from us as we grow older, but they're still there, and you can still get in touch with them. And I was so moved by the way that the narrative structure of how that was encapsulated in the script. That Chuck on the outside seems like Mr. Businessman with his business suit and his business briefcase, going to the business conference, the business hotel. And seemingly unremarkable to the outside eye on his way to work, and then he stops and puts his briefcase down and becomes a pure expression of freedom and joy and soul, and that's who he is on the inside. And it's the last dance that he doesn't know about yet, I found it so moving, and I think there's a truth in the story that Stephen King and Micah were excavating, and I got so excited. I could see it. I wanted to be part of it. I wanted to do it. I wanted to dance, and we did.
I found it I found it incredibly entertaining, as a story, and I think there was something about the kind of mystery of it as well, trying to sort of figure out that the idea is central to it, who is this guy, what is happening, and just the kind of unraveling of that, and all the figuring out of that was so compelling in the read, and every section of it, I didn't, as I started to read it, I just had no idea where it would take me. Every time I sort of thought that I could see down the road a little bit, something else would happen that would send me completely off, and I was just sort of in, and then you kind of, I think at a certain point which is a beautiful feeling, that you kind of abandon yourself to it. Yeah. You just say, I'm not going to be able to, I'm just going to have to immerse myself in the story and let it ride out, and that was beautiful, and there were just so many different truths that it spoke to for me, just so many, just very emotionally raw, emotionally honest, beautifully told story, and then where it lands is, to me, was incredibly profound, and a message that I thought, just as Tom was saying, really, just that I thought really hit incredibly powerfully and beautifully.
So, Mike, is it true, I heard a rumor that you wrote the script in a weekend?
I mean, after thinking about it every day for 2 years, and exhaustively kind of going through what I thought the movie was, the actual work of typing all of that work out took a weekend. Yeah, I talked to Steve on Friday. He said I could have the rights, and that he would send over the agreement. And I sent him the script on Monday, and didn't yet have the agreement. So it was a bit of a gamble. But it's a very misleading thing, because I was working on it immediately, 2 years prior, and was obsessed with the thing. So by then it was all just, most of the work had already been done.
Yeah, I know, there's a writer I adore, Tim O'Brien, and he says that 80% of writing is thinking, and then the actual writing is just kind of like,
Well, I have piles of notes and sketches. It's really misleading to go, oh yeah, I sat down and cranked it out over a weekend. But yeah, it is fun to say that though. I did it in a weekend.
So, what I have not read the novella. It's what we discussed. I was on a Stephen King island. I did 3 TV shows back to back to back, and I love Steve. He's a friend, and I still needed to get off the island. I just needed a break. So I didn't read Steve for a little bit, and I think it was when that came out was when I didn't read him. But is it structurally the same?
Yeah, structurally identical. That's the other thing. I get a lot of credit when it's like, oh, that wrote very fast. It's like, it's very easy for me to just move the words out of the short story into final draft, which I did a lot. The structure completely identical to the short story, down to a lot of the dialogue as well. And Nick Offerman is there to preserve the integrity of some of my favorite King prose, because I was loath to let that go. So yeah, the short story is actually very, very similar to. I tried my best to just protect it more than anything else.
Yeah, I thought the narration, again, not having read but I was like, that narration sounds like Stephen King.
Yeah.
So it's almost like you pulled the narration, gave it to Nick. Oh yeah. Okay. All right, great.
I think Chuck does the splits a few more times in the novella. I think Chuck does the splits a few more times.
Yeah,
in the novella.
They make a good point of it in the novella too.
How long did that take to shoot?
The dance?
The dance.
4 days of shooting the dance. They were rehearsing it 6 weeks before.
Yeah. In sort of increments.
Yeah. And we shot a portion of our. It was how we started to shoot too. Was day 1. And we had identified. I think it was a 5-hour window each day where the lighting would hopefully be consistent between the days. And we had to decide on the first day whether the scene took place behind a cloud or in the sunlight, because whatever it was meant that as we did these 5.5-minute takes, and it was partly cloudy the whole week, god damn it, it just meant that half of the take might be unusable if the sun went behind a cloud or came out from a cloud. And so we went with sunlight, and we would do those 5 hours each day. But Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, all dancing, and Tom and Annalise would do it from the very beginning to the end. There was really nothing short of like the close-up of your hand in the air. There was no way we could break it up. The choreography was too specific. The background choreography was too specific. We had to just do it from start to finish every time. And I remember you guys would dance your hearts out, soak through the wardrobe. You change into a fresh version of the wardrobe while we threw the only other one we had into the dryer, which was right there. So it would be ready for the next take. We'd reset everybody, we'd go, and by Thursday, you had burned holes in the bottom of your shoes. They were about that big. You could see the socks through them. They were brand new on Monday.
Yeah, brand new shoes. Yeah. It was hot out in Alabama.
And on the concrete. And,
on the concrete floor, yeah.
And to this day, the most joyful 4 days I've ever spent on any set ever. It was just as wonderful to watch on the very last take, more so, on the very last take of the last day than it was the first time. and by Thursday evening, my face hurt. I was sore, and it made me talk a little funny at times because my cheeks hurt from smiling for 4 straight days. Yeah, it was really something.
Well, thank you guys so much. Thank you for a terrific film. Thank you, audience. We've been asked to speak about the performers.